Fenris laughed at the primitive human ships docked at the Calthac station, not knowing the Iridians would soon regret mocking humanity when our secret fleet was revealed. Captain Alan Taylor clenched his fists as he overheard the wealthy Iridian merchant Fenris loudly ridiculing human spacecraft to a group of insectoid companions in the bustling promenade. Look at their ships, so primitive and crude compared to our sleek biomechanical vessels. Inferior humans pose no threat to us with garbage scows like that, Fenris scoffed, mandibles clicking. I'm glad we're building up forces to exterminate their pathetic colonies soon. Alan took a deep breath, biting his tongue to avoid confronting the arrogant bug. Drawing attention could compromise his critical mission. He had to stay focused. The encrypted message from Admiral Novak replayed in Alan's mind as he strode quickly back to the docked TSS Horizon. A clandestine fleet massing in the Argus Nebula, Iridians plotting a surprise attack on human settlers. He needed to reach New Eden Colony to await further orders, so the Terran Space Navy could counter this grave alien threat. If the secret human fleet failed to stop the Iridians, millions of men, women and children on the helpless colonies would be slaughtered without mercy. The very future of humanity's expansion to the stars was at stake. Alan swore he'd do whatever it took to teach the Iridians the error of underestimating mankind. Captain Taylor, welcome to New Eden. We appreciate the supplies you've brought, Jack said as they walked towards the cargo bay. Jack, there's something urgent I need to discuss with you in private, Alan said in a low voice, glancing around to ensure no one was within earshot. As the colony's crew began unloading the cargo, Alan and Jack stepped into a secluded office. Alan explained the impending Iridian threat and the TSN's secret preparations. Jack's face grew grim as he listened. Our defense systems are outdated and undersupplied, Jack admitted, rubbing his forehead. Budget cuts and red tape have left us vulnerable. I've been trying to get the higher-ups to listen, but they keep brushing me off. Alan nodded, his mind already working on a solution. The TSS Horizon's cargo includes advanced weapons systems and shielding technology meant for a new TSN outpost. We could use those to fortify New Eden's defenses. Jack's eyes widened. That could work, but we'd be going against protocol. Protocol be damned, Alan said, his voice fierce. The lives of everyone in this colony are at stake. We have to do whatever it takes to protect them. As they began the process of upgrading New Eden's defenses, an alarm blared from Alan's wrist communicator. He pulled up a holographic display, his face hardening as he saw the readings. A Iridian scout ship just entered the system. They're scanning the colony, Alan said, his fingers flying over the controls. They're gathering intel for the attack. Jack cursed under his breath. What do we do? Alan's mind raced, calculating the options. I have an idea. I'm launching an interceptor drone from the TSS Horizon. It's equipped with advanced stealth tech. If we can get it to latch onto the scout ship, we can track it back to the Iridian fleet. The drone launched, invisible to the Iridian sensors. It maneuvered silently through space, closing in on the scout ship. With a soft thunk, it attached itself to the hull, its transmitter activating. The drone is in place, Alan said, a fierce grin spreading across his face. We've got them now. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Novak, relaying the scout ship's location and the drone's transmissions. The Admiral's voice crackled over the comm, filled with grim determination. Well done, Captain Taylor. We'll take it from here. The secret fleet is preparing for a preemptive strike against the Iridians. We'll show them what happens when they mess with humanity. Alan nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation. The Iridians had no idea what was coming for them. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, and they would win. The Iridian scout ship docked in the hangar bay of the flagship. Admiral Zorgax watched the insectoid pilot disembark and scurry over. Report, Zorgax commanded. The human colony is ripe for conquest, Admiral. Their defenses are laughable. We can crush them like the insects they think we are. Excellent. The human filth will soon learn the price of their arrogance. Prepare the fleet to jump to New Eden. We attack immediately. As the Iridian warships powered up their engines, the cloaked TSN drone detached from the scout ship's hull. It began transmitting the fleet's coordinates back to the secret human fleet. On the bridge of the TSS Victorious, Admiral Novak gripped the arms of her chair. All ships prepare for hyperspace jump. Red alert. Battle stations. The TSN fleet of 30 warships, bristling with advanced weaponry, leaped into hyperspace. Moments later, they emerged next to the Iridian fleet, guns blazing. Explosions filled the void as the human ships opened fire. The Iridians were caught completely off guard. Several of their ships were torn apart by the initial salvo, debris and atmosphere spewing into space. "What is this? Where did they come from?" Admiral Zorgak shouted. "Sir, human ships, they ambushed us." "Return fire. Focus all attacks on their flagship." The Iridian ships regrouped, their own weapons hammering at the TSN fleet. Torpedoes and energy beams crisscrossed the battlefield as the two armadas clashed. Despite the Iridians' superior numbers, the humans' state-of-the-art technology proved devastating. Terran ships danced nimbly around the slower Iridian craft, their enhanced shields absorbing punishment as they picked off targets with precision. On the colony below, Alan received an urgent transmission from the TSS Victorious. Admiral Novak appeared, her face grim. "Captain Taylor, we've engaged the Iridian fleet. We're holding our own, but their numbers are significant. We could use some backup." Alan glanced at Jack. "The colony upgrades?" "Defenses are online and the fighter squadron is prepped," Jack confirmed. "We're on our way, Admiral." Alan turned to the colony personnel. "I need volunteers to fly the fighters. This is it, people. We're taking the fight to the Iridians." A chorus of "Aye, sir" filled the room as the colonists scrambled to their ships. Alan sprinted to the TSS Horizon, his heart pounding. This was their chance to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The TSS Horizon and the squadron of upgraded colonial fighters blasted off from New Eden, climbing rapidly through the atmosphere. Alan gripped the controls, his eyes fixed on the distant flashes of the space battle. "All right, everyone," he broadcasted to the other ships. "Let's give the Iridians a taste of human ingenuity. Accelerate to attack speed." The small fleet hurtled towards the clash of titans, weapons armed and ready. The Iridians wouldn't know what hit them. The Iridian warships swarmed around the battered TSN fleet like a horde of locusts descending upon a field. Explosions ripped through the void as the relentless alien vessels pounded the human ships with a barrage of plasma torpedoes and railgun fire. On the bridge of the TSS Victorious, sparks flew from overloaded consoles as the ship shuddered under the onslaught. Admiral Novak gripped the armrests of his chair, his face illuminated by the red glow of emergency lights. "Shields at 15%. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, an officer shouted over the blaring alarms. "Divert all auxiliary power to the shields," Novak commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Helm, bring us about. We need to fall back and regroup." The Victorious turned ponderously, its engines straining as it disengaged from the front lines. Iridian ships pursued, their weapons pummeling the flagship's weakening defenses. Novak opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Novak. We're outmatched. Sending out a distress signal to any nearby TSN vessels. Hold the line as long as you can. Novak out." As the signal broadcast, Alan's fighter squadron emerged from hyperspace, diving into the fray with guns blazing. The TSS Horizon hung back, its advanced sensors probing the Iridian ships for vulnerabilities. "Captain Taylor, I'm detecting weaknesses in the Iridian power cores and weapon systems," the Horizon's tactical officer reported. Alan's eyes narrowed. "Relay that intel to the squadron. We're going in hard and fast. Target those systems and give the fleet some breathing room." The upgraded colonial fighters swooped in, their enhanced weapons slicing through the Iridian ship's defenses like a scalpel. Power cores exploded, weapons went offline, and the alien formation fell into disarray. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Zorgax slammed a chitinous fist against his console. "What is this? Where did these fighters come from?" Zorgax's compound eyes narrowed. "Dispatch our elite fighter wing, crush these impudent humans." A swarm of sleek, deadly Iridian fighters peeled away from the main fleet, hurtling towards Alan's squadron. The human pilots scattered, engaging the aliens in a dizzying ballet of death. Alan juked and weaved, his fighters' advanced thrusters allowing him to outmaneuver the Iridian elites. He lined up a shot, his targeting computer locking onto an enemy fighter's power core. With a squeeze of the trigger, a lance of energy pierced the alien ship, reducing it to a cloud of debris. But for every Iridian fighter destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The sheer number of enemy craft began to overwhelm Alan's squadron, forcing them into a defensive posture. "Fall back and regroup," Alan ordered over the comm. "We can't take them all on alone." As the colonial fighters disengaged, the Iridian fleet surged forward, sensing victory. The TSN ships, battered and depleted, formed a desperate last stand. Just as all hope seemed lost, a ripple of distorted space heralded the arrival of reinforcements. A fresh wave of TSN ships, led by the massive dreadnought TSS Retribution, burst into the battle, weapons primed and ready. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Elena Ivanova stood tall, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. She had received Novak's distress call and rushed to the aid of her former student, Alan, and the beleaguered TSN fleet. "All ships engage the enemy," Ivanova commanded, her voice cold as steel. "Show these Iridians the true might of the Terran Space Navy." The Retribution surged forward, its immense guns unleashing a storm of destruction upon the Iridian fleet. The alien ships reeled under the onslaught, their formation shattering like glass. Alan felt a surge of hope as he saw his mentor's ship leading the charge. With renewed determination, he rallied his squadron and rejoined the fight, striking at the Iridians with redoubled fury. The tide of battle had turned, but the fight was far from over. The Iridians, though battered and bloodied, fought back with the desperate ferocity of a cornered beast. Ships on both sides erupted into flames, their hulls rent by the ceaseless barrage of weapons fire. In the heart of the maelstrom, Alan and Ivanova fought side by side, their ships dancing a deadly duet as they carved a path of destruction through the Iridian ranks. The Retribution's shields flared, absorbing the brunt of the enemy fire, while Alan's nimble fighter darted in and out, picking off targets with surgical precision. "Captain Taylor, watch your 6, Ivanova warned over the comm as a trio of Iridian fighters bore down on Alan's position. Alan wrenched his ship into a tight spiral, narrowly evading the plasma torpedoes screaming past his cockpit. With a deft flick of the controls, he looped around behind the Iridians, his fingers tightening on the trigger. "Eat this, you bug-faced bastards," he growled, unleashing a barrage of laser fire that shredded the enemy fighters like tissue paper. But even as Alan and Ivanova fought with all their skill and courage, the battle raged on around them, a symphony of destruction that filled the void with the screams of dying ships and the silent tomb of space. Captain Ivanova's eyes flashed with fierce determination as she surveyed the chaos of the battle raging around the TSS Retribution. The massive dreadnought shuddered as its shields absorbed the onslaught of Iridian weapons fire. "Tactical, give me a targeting solution on those command ships," Ivanova barked. "Helm, bring us about. It's time to show these Iridians what this prototype cannon can do." The crew leaped into action, their hands flying over consoles as they maneuvered the Retribution into position. The ship's prototype long-range plasma cannon hummed to life, its barrel glowing with an ominous red light. A blinding beam of plasma erupted from the cannon, spearing through space and slamming into the nearest Iridian command ship. The alien vessel's shields flared briefly before shattering, allowing the plasma to carve deep into its hull. Secondary explosions rippled across the ship's surface as it lurched drunkenly, venting atmosphere and debris. The Retribution's crew cheered as the Iridian ship listed, its engines flickering and dying. Ivanova allowed herself a grim smile before turning her attention to the next target. Across the battlefield, the TSN ships pressed their advantage, emboldened by the Retribution's devastating attacks. Terran cruisers and destroyers engaged the Iridians at point-blank range, their guns hammering at the alien ship's weakening defenses. In the midst of the chaos, Alan and his squadron streaked towards the Iridian flagship, the YSS Invincible. The massive ship loomed before them, its hull bristling with weapons emplacements and swarming with fighter craft. "All right, Reapers," Alan called over the comm, using his squadron's call sign. "Let's give Admiral Zorgax a wake-up call he won't forget. Walker, you're with me. The rest of you, keep those fighters off our backs." Iridian fighters scrambled to intercept them, plasma cannons spitting fire. Alan jinked and wove, his hands dancing over the controls as he evaded the incoming shots. "Walker, we've got to get closer," Alan grunted, juking hard to starboard to avoid a missile. "Those defenses are too thick." "Roger that," Walker replied, his voice tense. "I'll draw their fire, you line up the shot." Walker's fighter peeled away, lasers blazing as he taunted the Iridian defenses. Alan gritted his teeth, pushing his engines to the limit as he raced towards the Invincible's bridge. The flagship's point defense gun swiveled to track him, filling the void with a hail of plasma. Alan's shield flared as shots grazed his hull, alarms blaring in the cockpit. At the last moment, he wrenched his fighter into a corkscrew roll, narrowly evading the worst of the barrage. The bridge loomed before him, its viewports glinting in the light of the battle. "Torpedoes locked," Alan snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Eat this, you bastards!" A volley of high-yield torpedoes leaped from his fighter's launchers, streaking towards the Invincible's bridge. The flagship's defenses frantically tried to intercept them, but it was too late. The torpedoes detonated, engulfing the bridge in a blinding fireball. The Invincible shuddered, its hull rippling as secondary explosions tore through its decks. Escape pods burst from the stricken ship as it began to list, its engines sputtering. "Zorgax is dead," Alan whooped over the comm. "The flagship is crippled." Cheers erupted over the channel as the Iridian fleet, suddenly leaderless and disorganized, began to break apart. The TSN ships pounced, hammering the aliens with renewed ferocity. But even as victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged. The YSS Vengeance, a heavily damaged Iridian cruiser, broke away from the melee, its engines flaring as it aimed its prow directly at the TSS Retribution. Ivanova's eyes narrowed as she saw the Iridian ship accelerating towards them, its hull glowing with the heat of its overloading reactors. "All hands abandon ship," Ivanova ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Get to the escape pods, now." Alarms blared throughout the Retribution as the crew scrambled to evacuate. Escape pods shot from the dreadnought's hull, carrying the crew to safety. On the bridge, Ivanova remained at her post, her hands flying over the controls as she diverted all power to the shields. She knew that the Retribution's defenses were the only thing standing between the Vengeance and the fleeing escape pods. The Iridian cruiser loomed larger on the viewscreen, its hull pitted and scorched from the battle. Ivanova's jaw clenched as she watched it approach, the seconds ticking down like the beats of a dying heart. Alan's heart raced as he watched the YSS Vengeance hurtling towards the crippled TSS Retribution. Captain Ivanova's face, tight with grim determination, filled his viewscreen. "Ivanova, get out of there," he yelled over the comm, his fighter already streaking towards the Retribution. "Negative, Taylor," Ivanova replied, her voice strained. "I have to keep the shields up long enough for the crew to escape." Alan gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He couldn't let his mentor sacrifice herself like this. An idea struck him like a lightning bolt. "Reaper Squadron, form up on me," he ordered, switching to the squadron's frequency. "We're going to use the Horizon's tractor beam to pull the Retribution's crew out." Acknowledgements crackled over the comm as the fighters fell into formation behind Alan. The TSS Horizon loomed ahead, its tractor beam already powering up. "Horizon, lock onto the Retribution's escape pods and start pulling them in," Alan commanded, his fingers flying over his controls. The tractor beam lanced out, snagging the nearest pod and reeling it towards the Horizon's hangar bay. Alan's squadron fanned out, their own tractor beams grabbing the remaining pods. On the Retribution's bridge, Ivanova's eyes widened as she saw the escape pods being pulled to safety. A small smile tugged at her lips. "Not bad, Taylor," she murmured, wincing as another explosion rocked the ship. Alan's fighter darted towards the Retribution, its tractor beam locking onto Ivanova's escape pod. Just as it ejected from the bridge, the Vengeance filled his view screen, its prow crumpling as it slammed into the Retribution's hull. The resulting explosion was blinding, a silent fireball that consumed both ships in a maelstrom of debris and shrapnel. Alan wrenched his fighter away, the shockwave buffeting his shields as he pulled Ivanova's pod clear of the inferno. "I've got her," he whooped over the comm, relief flooding through him. As the remnants of the Retribution and the Vengeance spun lazily through the void, the Iridian fleet, its ships battered and leaderless, began to power down their weapons. One by one, they signaled their surrender, their crew's morale shattered by the loss of their flagship and admiral. On the bridge of the TSS Victorious, Admiral Novak let out a long, slow breath. They had won, but at a heavy cost. He opened a channel to Alan's fighter. "Commodore Taylor," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "You've done the TSN proud today. I'm assigning you to lead a task force to hunt down any remaining Iridian threats in the sector." Alan blinked, surprise momentarily overriding his exhaustion. "Commodore, sir?" "You've earned it," Novak replied, a smile in his voice. "Now get some rest. You're going to need it." As the TSN ships began to regroup, tending to their wounded and securing the Iridian prisoners, a very different scene was unfolding on the Iridian homeworld of Iridia Prime. In the grand chamber of the High Council, Fenris slammed his fist onto the ornate table, his mandibles quivering with rage. The other councillors flinched, their compound eyes wide with fear. "Defeated?" Fenris snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "By humans?" The councillor who had delivered the news cowered, his carapace rattling. "Yes, Trademaster. Our fleet was ambushed by a secret human armada. Admiral Zorgax is dead, and the Invincible has been destroyed." Fenris's eyes narrowed to slits, his mind racing. The humans had played them for fools, lulling them into a false sense of superiority, only to reveal their true strength at the critical moment. "This insult will not stand," he hissed, rising to his full height. "Mobilize the war machine. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. We will drown the humans in their own blood and grind their worlds to dust beneath our feet." The councillors scrambled to obey, their earlier shock replaced by a rising tide of anger and bloodlust. The humans had sown the wind, and now they would reap the whirlwind. On New Eden, Jack Hudson stood before a holographic display, watching the distant flashes of the battle. Around him, the colonists cheered as the Iridian fleet surrendered, their faces alight with relief and joy. But Jack's expression was grim, his eyes hard as he studied the readouts. The colony's defenses were stronger now, but he knew that this was only the beginning. "All right, people," he called out, his voice cutting through the celebration. "We've won the battle, but the war is just getting started. I want those defense towers manned around the clock, and I want every able-bodied colonist trained on the new weapons systems." He turned back to the display, his jaw set with determination. The Iridians would be back, and when they came, New Eden would be ready. Commodore Alan Taylor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the TSS Dauntless, as his task force of 15 advanced TSN warships patrolled the asteroid belt of the Sigma Draconis system. The bridge crew worked diligently at their stations, scanning for any signs of Iridian activity. Suddenly, the tactical officer called out, "Sir, I'm detecting an anomalous energy signature coming from one of the larger asteroids. It appears to be a hidden base." Alan strode over to the tactical display, his eyes narrowing as he studied the readouts. The base was heavily fortified, with weapons emplacements and defensive shields that blended seamlessly into the asteroid's rocky surface. "This must be a staging ground for the Iridians' invasion," Alan muttered, his mind racing. "We need to take it out." He turned to his communications officer. "Get me Sergeant Thompson, we're going in." Minutes later, Alan stood in the armory, checking his weapons as his team of elite TSN Marines geared up. Sergeant Mike Thompson, a burly man with a scar running down his left cheek, hefted a demolitions pack onto his shoulders. "What's the plan, sir?" Thompson asked, his voice gruff. "We'll infiltrate the base using a captured Iridian shuttle," Alan explained, slapping a magazine into his rifle. "Once inside, we plant charges at key structural points and sabotage the power core. We cripple their offensive capabilities before they even have a chance to launch their invasion." The team boarded the shuttle, their faces grim with determination. As they approached the asteroid base, Alan's pilot deftly maneuvered the craft to avoid detection, slipping past the base's sensor net and docking at a maintenance airlock. The airlock hissed open, and Alan's team moved in, weapons at the ready. They were immediately met with a hail of plasma fire as Iridian soldiers and security drones swarmed to meet them. "Take cover!" Alan shouted, diving behind a crate as he returned fire. The corridor erupted into a chaotic exchange of gunfire and explosions. Thompson lobbed a grenade, the blast sending Iridian soldiers flying. "Push forward!" he yelled, charging ahead. The team battled their way through the base, planting explosive charges as they went. Iridian resistance intensified as they neared the power core, with heavily armed soldiers and advanced combat drones blocking their path. Alan ducked as a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, the heat singeing his hair. He snapped off a shot, dropping a Iridian soldier. "Thompson, get that charge set," he ordered. As Thompson worked to plant the final charge, a massive Iridian mech burst through the wall, its heavy plating gleaming under the emergency lights. The mech's cockpit hissed open, revealing none other than Fenris himself. "So you humans have meddled in our affairs for the last time," Fenris snarled, his voice amplified by the mech's speakers. "Now you will die." Alan's team scattered as the mech opened fire, its heavy plasma cannons tearing through the room. They returned fire, their weapons seemingly ineffective against the mech's thick armor. "Aim for the joints," Alan shouted, rolling to avoid a barrage of missiles. "Thompson, get that charge ready." The team coordinated their attack, focusing their fire on the mech's weak points. Slowly but surely they wore down its defenses, even as they took casualties of their own. In a final desperate move, Fenris activated the mech's self-destruct sequence, intending to take the humans with him. "If I die, you die with me," he screamed, his eyes wild with hatred. "The charge is set," Thompson yelled, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "We need to move now." Alan and his remaining team members sprinted for the exit as the base's alarms blared. They dove into the waiting shuttle just as the power core detonated, the explosion ripping through the asteroid and engulfing the mech in a blinding fireball. The shuttle rocketed away from the base as it collapsed in on itself, the asteroid crumbling into a field of debris. Alan slumped back in his seat, his heart pounding in his chest. They had struck a significant blow against the Iridians, but he knew the war was far from over. Rear Admiral Alan Taylor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the TSS Dauntless, as his task force moved into position around New Eden. The intel recovered from the destroyed Iridian base had been a game-changer. Admiral Novak's analysts had worked tirelessly to decrypt the data, revealing the Iridians' plans for a multi-pronged assault on key human colonies. New Eden was at the top of their list. Alan clenched his jaw as he studied the tactical display. The colony's defenses had been bolstered significantly since his last visit, but he knew they would be put to the ultimate test against the incoming Iridian invasion fleet. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up a massive Iridian force dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge," the tactical officer reported, her voice tight with tension. "They're being led by the YSS Decimator, General Zaxor's command ship." Alan's eyes narrowed. Zaxor was Fenris's second-in-command, a ruthless tactician known for his brutality and cunning. If he was leading the invasion, the Iridians were throwing everything they had at New Eden. "Sound battle stations," Alan ordered, his voice calm and controlled. "All ships assume formation Delta 3. We need to keep the Iridians away from the planet's surface for as long as possible." As alarms blared throughout the fleet, the TSN ships moved into a defensive formation, their weapons primed and ready. On the surface of New Eden, Jack Hudson rallied the colony's militia, distributing the advanced weaponry and armor that had been smuggled in by the TSS Horizon. A cheer went up from the assembled colonists-turned-soldiers, their faces grim with determination. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they were ready to fight to the last. In orbit, the Iridian fleet surged forward, their ships bristling with weapons. The YSS Decimator hung back, directing the assault like a conductor leading a symphony of destruction. Alan's task force opened fire, their advanced weaponry tearing into the Iridian ships. The upgraded defenses of New Eden joined the fray, orbital platforms and surface-to-space cannons adding their firepower to the mix. The Iridians returned fire, their weapons impacting against the TSN ships' shields in a dazzling display of light and energy. The battle was joined, and the fate of New Eden hung in the balance. Despite the humans' valiant efforts, the sheer number of Iridian ships began to take its toll. One by one, the TSN vessels fell, their hulls breached, and their crews spilling out into the unforgiving void of space. A cheer went up from the Iridian ranks as they broke through the orbital defenses, their dropships descending on the planet's surface like a swarm of locusts. In the colony, Jack and his militia braced themselves for the onslaught. The Iridian troops hit the ground running, their advanced weapons spitting plasma and laser fire. The colonists fought back with everything they had, but it was clear they were outmatched. Jack ducked behind a barricade as a plasma bolt sizzled overhead. He popped up, firing his rifle at a group of advancing Iridians. The bugs fell, their armor smoldering, but more took their place. "Fall back to the secondary defensive line," Jack ordered, his voice hoarse from shouting. "We need to buy time for the civilians to evacuate." In orbit, Alan watched helplessly as the Iridians overran the colony's defenses. He knew that if something wasn't done soon, New Eden would fall, and the Iridians would have a foothold in human space. He made a decision, his jaw set with determination. "Prep my shuttle," he ordered, turning to his XO. "I'm leading a strike team to the Decimator. We're going to cut the head off this snake." As Alan and his team boarded the shuttle, he knew that the fate of New Eden, and possibly all of humanity, rested on their shoulders. They had to succeed, no matter the cost. The cloaked shuttle slipped silently through the void, its advanced stealth systems rendering it invisible to the Iridian command ship's sensors. On board, Alan and his strike team checked their weapons and gear, preparing for the infiltration. "Remember, our objective is to capture General Zaxa and seize control of the bridge," Alan reminded his team, his voice low and steady. "Expect heavy resistance. The Iridians won't give up their command ship without a fight." The shuttle docked with the command ship, its airlock sealing with a soft hiss. Alan and his team moved swiftly and silently, their footsteps muffled by the ship's humming engines. As they rounded a corner, a group of Iridian soldiers spotted them, their chitinous armor glinting under the ship's harsh lighting. The soldiers opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Alan and his team dove for cover, returning fire with their own advanced weaponry. The confined space of the ship's corridors turned the firefight into a brutal close-quarters battle, with both sides taking casualties. Sergeant Thompson lobbed a grenade, the explosion sending Iridian soldiers flying like ragdolls. "Push forward," he yelled, his face smeared with sweat and grime. The team fought their way through the ship, overcoming security systems and Iridian resistance with grim determination. As they neared the bridge, a sudden hail of plasma fire forced them to take cover. General Zaxa strode forward, flanked by his personal guard. The towering Iridian commander wielded a crackling energy sword, its blade casting an eerie glow in the dimly lit corridor. "Foolish humans," Zaxa sneered, his mandibles clicking. "You dare to challenge me on my own ship?" Zaxa laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Over, no human. This is only the beginning." With a roar, Zaxa charged forward, his energy sword slashing through the air. Alan met him head-on, his rifle firing in short, controlled bursts. The two leaders clashed in a furious melee, their weapons sparking and sizzling as they struck against each other. Zaxor's energy sword sliced through Alan's armor, drawing blood, but Alan fought through the pain, his mind focused on the mission. In a desperate move, Alan lunged forward, knocking Zaxor's sword from his grasp. The Iridian commander stumbled, off balance, and Alan pressed his advantage, slamming the butt of his rifle into Zaxor's face. Zaxor crumpled to the ground unconscious. Alan stood over him, breathing heavily, his side burning with pain from the wound inflicted by the energy sword. "Secure the prisoner," Alan ordered, his voice strained. "We need to get to the bridge." The strike team pushed forward, overwhelming the remaining Iridian guards and seizing control of the bridge. Alan, fighting through the agony of his injury, began transmitting false orders to the Iridian fleet, sowing confusion and disarray among their ranks. On the surface of New Eden, Jack Hudson and the colonial militia fought with renewed vigor, bolstered by the arrival of TSN reinforcements. The Iridian ground forces, their coordination shattered by the false orders from their command ship, began to fall back towards their landing craft. Alan, his face pale and slick with sweat, rallied his remaining team members. "We need to get off this ship," he said, his voice tight with pain. "Set the reactor to overload. We're going to blow this thing to hell." The team fought their way back to the shuttle, Alan leaning heavily on Sergeant Thompson for support. They launched from the command ship, racing away as the reactor overloaded behind them. The Iridian command ship exploded in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave buffeting the shuttle as it sped towards the TSS horizon. Alan slumped in his seat, his vision blurring from blood loss and exhaustion. But even as darkness closed in around him, Alan knew that the battle was not yet won. The Iridians would regroup, would come again with even greater force. The war for humanity's survival had only just begun. "All ships press the attack," Alan commanded, his voice strained but determined. "Target their engines and weapons. Don't give them a chance to regroup." The TSN fleet surged forward, their weapons tearing into the Iridian ships with renewed ferocity. Explosions filled the void as the alien vessels crumpled under the onslaught, their hulls breached and venting atmosphere. But the Iridians were not finished yet. As the TSN ships closed in, a massive energy surge erupted from the heart of the Iridian fleet. A blinding pulse of electromagnetic energy swept outward, engulfing the TSN ships in its wake. Consoles sparked and alarms blared as the EMP device wreaked havoc on the TSN fleet systems. Ships drifted, their engines and weapons offline, leaving them vulnerable to the Iridians' counterattack. "Damage report," Alan barked, gripping the arm of his chair as the horizon shuddered under the impact of the EMP. "Main power offline, shields down, weapons non-responsive," the tactical officer reported, her voice tight with tension. "We're sitting ducks." Alan's mind raced, searching for a solution. The Iridians were regrouping, their weapons coming back online as they prepared to finish off the crippled TSN fleet. He knew that there was only one way to stop them. "I evacuate the ship," he ordered, his voice calm and resolute. "All hands abandon ship, get to the escape pods." "That's an order," Alan snapped, his eyes blazing. "I'll stay behind and set the reactor to overload. We're going to take out as many of these bastards as we can." As the crew reluctantly filed off the bridge, Alan limped to the helm, his fingers flying over the controls. He plotted a course directly for the heart of the Iridian fleet, where the massive flagship loomed. The Horizon's engines flared to life, propelling the ship forward on its final fateful journey. Alan watched the view screen as the Iridian ships grew larger, their weapons turning to face the oncoming threat. Suddenly, a familiar face appeared on the comm screen. Fenris, his carapace scorched and cracked, leered at Alan from the bridge of the flagship. "You think you've won, human?" the Iridian snarled, his mandibles clicking with rage. "I'll see you burn before I let you take my ship." Alan's eyes widened as he realized the implications of Fenris's words. The Iridian leader was on the flagship, and he was overriding the ship's systems. preventing Alan from detonating the Horizon's reactor remotely. "Fenris, you bastard," Alan growled, his hand hovering over the manual detonation switch. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." The Horizon shuddered as the flagship's weapons impacted against its hull, alarms screaming in protest. Alan's fingers closed around the detonation switch, his eyes locked on the view screen as the flagship loomed ever larger. In a final defiant act, Alan slammed his fist down on the switch. The Horizon's reactor went critical, a blinding flash of light erupting from the heart of the ship. The explosion consumed the flagship, Fenris's scream of rage echoing over the comm before it was abruptly silenced. The shockwave from the detonation rippled outward, engulfing the remaining Iridian ships in a maelstrom of fire and debris. The TSN fleet, battered and weakened, emerged from the chaos, their sensors confirming the destruction of the Iridian armada. But the victory was bittersweet. The loss of Alan Taylor and the TSS Horizon weighed heavily on the survivors, a testament to the sacrifice and bravery of those who had given their lives to protect humanity. As the TSN ships limped back to New Eden, their hulls scarred and their crews exhausted, a solemn silence fell over the fleet. They had won the battle, but the war had taken a heavy toll. On the surface of the planet, Jack Hudson and the survivors of the ground battle emerged from their bunkers, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The Iridian forces had retreated, their landing craft fleeing the system in the wake of their fleet's destruction. But the scars of the battle were evident in the shattered buildings and cratered streets of the colony. The survivors, their faces haunted and their eyes hollow, began the long process of rebuilding, knowing that the sacrifices of their fallen comrades would never be forgotten. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.